So welcome again to Savannah CASA's informational session. My name is Kate Blair. I'm the executive director. I'm going to ask our staff that's here to share their names and what they do with us.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. Oh. Go ahead, Sharon.
Hi, I'm Sharon Newman, Advocacy Coordinator with CASA. I've been here a little over a year, and my specialty program is working with the children or the youth 14 and over, especially those that are getting ready to age out of foster care.
Hey, everyone. I'm Janae Brown. I'm one of the newest, I am the newest coordinator. I started in August. My specialty area is a program called SPARK, and it deals with children who have mental health issues. And I'm excited to hopefully see you guys in the next training. Thank you.
I am Tim Wright. I'm also a coordinator here at CASA. I've been here about a year and a half, a little bit more. My specialty is working with the dually involved children, those children who are dependent and delinquent. And I hope that you guys enjoy the training and have a great time if you join us.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Hornfeld, and it is my honor to be the training facilitator for the CASA pre-service training. Should you choose to apply and join the CASA team, we'll be spending 6 weeks together, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just dive right in for you all to just learn more, and then again, you can ask as many questions as you have at the end. We'll stay on as long as you have questions, but I'm going to go ahead and just go right through the presentation so that we don't take up too much of your time. We again appreciate that you join us this evening. I hear it's National Wine Day, so we might be breaking into some of your wine happy hours. So I thank you even more that you chose today to join us during happy hour. Anyway, so we are, as we said, Savannah Chatham CASA, which stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates. I'm going to play a little video, hoping my sons are not on electronics stealing my internet. So we'll see how this goes. So let me know if you have any issue hearing it. We're going to do this and go into the presentation after. Maybe. Okay. It's just thinking. It just wants to think, apparently. All right.
Growing up is tough for a kid. They have school and homework, practices and games, there are doctor's appointments and detention halls. The making friends and the keeping friends, discovering who they are and who they aren't. There's so much to learn. There's this whole world out there, right here. These times are transforming in someone's story, and they can really be quite chaotic. That chaos of being a child only increases when abuse and neglect fill their home. The normal winds of chaos are now a storm, and sometimes when the storm is so great, a child must be removed from their home. And this is a really tough day. It's complicated and it's painful. When a child is removed from their home because of abuse or neglect, they leave their normal and they enter foster care. The court sends them to a new place, a new home, often to a new school with new people, new everything. And all of these new things aim at a better life for the child. They aim to help in the healing process for the family. But it's still tough. They still have the school activities, the doctor's appointments, and the lessons to learn. But now court dates, visits with parents, and check-ins with social workers quickly bombard the calendar. And there's the pain of separation from what they know and where they feel comfortable. There are hundreds of children in our city who experience chaotic days like this, weeks like this, years like this. And these days, weeks, and years are difficult. They're exhausting and isolating. They're really tough. But there are ways to help. Ways to bear the burdens the child is carrying. Ways to make the days less tough. These children need to feel more supported. They need someone constant who is on their team. Someone who is fighting for their best amidst all the shuffle. And a CASA volunteer provides this help. A court-appointed special advocate helps bear these burdens. They are the constant amidst the chaos. In the middle of all the shuffle and uncertainty, they know the child. There are still tough days, but now there's someone standing up for the child day in, day out. Someone who knows both the biological and foster parents. Someone who meets with the teachers, doctors, and social workers to ensure the child's needs are being met. Someone who speaks for the child's best interest in court. Someone who the judge counts on for insight. Someone who cares about the child and just lets them be a kid. Someone who is there for the tough days, the great days, and the in-between days. This someone is so important. This someone is a CASA volunteer. And there are hundreds of children in our city waiting for a CASA volunteer. They're waiting for someone to speak up for them. They're waiting for someone to help weather the storm. Each child in foster care needs this support, this someone to count on. Be this someone for a child in foster care. Be their advocate. Be a powerful voice for their best interest. Be a CASA volunteer.
All right. So as you can see, a CASA volunteer is really that one constant in a child's life. And right now, we have almost 400 children in foster care here in Chatham County alone. That doesn't mean all 400 are here physically in Chatham County. Their court hearings are here. They're from Chatham County, but due to the lack of foster homes, they may be placed all over the state. So about a little over, more than 50% are here in Chatham County, but quite a few are scattered around. So I like to say, if you're interested in becoming a foster parent, do not become a CASA, go become a foster parent. That's what our community really, really needs that. But we also understand that while CASA is a big commitment, a foster parent is an even bigger commitment. So we appreciate your interest in serving children in foster care in this way. Right now, we're serving almost 80% of those children that are in foster care here in Chatham County. So we are recruiting volunteers to help us get that last 20% that we are not serving, to make sure that every single child in foster care has a advocate fighting for them. And this is just a great quote that we really love about, that there can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way which it treats its children. And here in Chatham County, we really want that our most vulnerable children that have experienced abuse or neglect, those that are in our foster care system, that we show that we care about them in the way that we treat them and make sure that they are cared for. So CASA is a volunteer that's appointed by the juvenile court to advocate for the best interests of children who've experienced abuse or neglect. Nearly all the children we serve are in foster care. Some have some kind of defects intervention, but are not in foster care, or we have a new court that serves children that have been commercially trafficked. And if that's the case, they may not be in foster care, but we still assign a CASA to them to ensure that they can get the help they need. But most are in foster care. All have experienced abuse or neglect. So what is a CASA volunteer? So a CASA volunteer spends time monthly with a child or children that they've been assigned to. Every CASA volunteer is assigned one case that could be a sibling group or an individual child. When they are appointed to this case, after they complete their training and are sworn in by the courts, they are appointed and they receive an appointment letter, which means that they serve as a guardian ad litem, which means that they can have access to all of the child's records, and they can speak to all of the key people in the child's life: teachers, doctors, family members, counselors. So you'd be appointed. The judge is saying that this person needs to know everything about this child. And so you bring your little paper. Sometimes you get a little pushback, and we can help you whenever there's pushback, but you say, I'm appointed to this child. You need to release those medical records to me, or I need to have access to their school records. And then when you get access to all of these things, and in combination with meeting and visiting and spending time with your child or children, you then evaluate all these areas of their life to make sure that their needs are being met, both educationally, so at school, psychologically, emotionally. That might mean that they need, again, all these children have experienced trauma. They've all been abused or neglected. Most have been removed from their home. And so they're experiencing incredibly traumatic moments. And so Your responsibility would be to make sure that in all areas that they're being met, and that DFACS, which is the Department of Family and Children's Services, is providing all the necessary resources and referrals so that the child's needs are being met. Well, we then can't just meet the child's needs. Where the rubber meets the road is when we're in the courtroom. So we take everything we learn and we go to the court hearings and we tell the judge exactly, we put it into a report, a written report, but then we also explain it in the courtroom and tell the judge what we think would be in the best interest of the child. And the judge obviously holds the power. The judge is the one that makes those decisions. A child with a CASA are twice as likely to find a safe or permanent home. One of the ways that this is the case is CASA volunteers do the research. Case managers at DFACS have upwards of 40 different cases. And Sharon, who's on this call, one of our staff members, can tell you we stole her from DFACS. She had a caseload, a large caseload, and it is nearly impossible for them to meet all of the needs of the children and to also give the child the time and the attention that that child really needs. And so a CASA volunteer can assist the DFACS case manager in getting those necessary records, as well as looking for family members and finding potential placements. Our goal is always to place a child where they have some kind of either biological or familiar connection. So whether it be their aunt, right, like their actual aunt, or their auntie, like my mom's best friend that I always called aunt, right? And so they also are half as likely to reenter foster care because we're making sure we're providing to the judge that all of the necessary things that he or she may need to know, so that the child isn't returned more quickly than they should, and that the family is given the resources they need to be successful and the child doesn't return. They're more likely to succeed in school. If you have children or aunts or nieces or nephews, or you remember when you were in school, how important it is to have an adult invested in your education. Teachers also have very large caseloads and can't catch every single thing that may fall through the cracks. A committed adult, when a child may be going from foster home to foster home, to have one committed adult in their life makes a really big difference. And then when more than half of the children that enter foster care do become reunified with their parents, it's really important that we help connect families to the resources so that the children do not linger in foster care. If you're not familiar with the foster care system, it's easy to think that children are in foster care because they just have parents that don't care, or they've been really physically abused or sexually abused. The truth of the matter is most of our children have not experienced actual explicit abuse, but neglect. So if a family member has substance use disorder, unaddressed mental health issues, when those things are happening, a child, is put in a very precarious situation, and the child is removed from the home. When those things are addressed, when the parents get the help that they need, then the child and the home is safe again. The child can be returned. And so our goal is always reunification. A child deserves to be raised by their biological parents. But in the end, the child is the most important thing, and keeping them safe is most important. And so we make recommendations based on that, but we always keep it centered that the child deserves to have that. And we also fight for a child to stay in placements and try to address. So if maybe a child is themselves having some mental health concerns or are acting out behaviorally because they've been through a significant amount of trauma, and that's what you do when you're a child that's experienced trauma, you act out. And that can disrupt any foster placements. Well, that CASA volunteer can be that person that helps navigate and talks with the families and make sure the resources are put in, because being in foster care in and of itself is not damaging to a child. The constant movement is what continues to re-traumatize the child. And also ensuring that children, whenever appropriate, which is most times, that they are having visitation with their parents, and they're living with their siblings. If that's not appropriate, then having visitation with their siblings. We always try to keep siblings together. A sibling group of 8 or 9 may not be able to be together. It's very hard to find a foster home for that many children. And so making sure that visitation happens. And team, please jump in if there's anything that you think that I'm missing. So I never know what members of the team are going to come and jump in. I should start assigning roles so it's not just me talking this whole time. So it's also, this is just a really quick slide to talk about why CASA volunteers exist. We save taxpayers a lot of money because we provide additional support. The system, child welfare system, is incredibly overburdened. As I mentioned, that's why case managers have really large caseloads, as do a child's attorneys. But a CASA they're a volunteer. And so, right, it's free. It only costs what it takes us to train and maintain volunteers. And so we save a lot of money and we reduce the amount of time children are in care. But even more importantly, children meet like dozens of people when they come into foster care: judges, attorneys, case managers, psychologists, doctors, all these people, foster parents. So often they're moved out of their county and are meeting all new friend groups and everything. But all of the professionals in their lives are paid to be there. There's only one consistent person in their life that is there just simply because they care, and it is their CASA volunteer. And that is what's so powerful around the fact, not that it just saves taxpayer money, but that a child is like, wait, hold up. You aren't paid to be talking to me right now. And that is, to a teenager, first mind-blowing when they've been through 3 different case managers, but it also just shows them that there are committed, loving people in this community that really want to see them succeed. All right, just more little cute quotes. So I'm going to pass it over to Eric, and so you can stop hearing my voice for a moment. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you so much, Kate. So I know what you're probably thinking now. How can I be one of those committed, loving adults that can show up for a child who needs it the most right now? Well, like I said earlier, I'm the CASA pre-service training facilitator. So should you choose to join us, this is what we're going to be doing. Our training takes about 40 hours, and we call it a flex curriculum because we do half of it online and half of it independent, also online. So just like we're doing right now in a Zoom meeting, we would all meet for about 3 hours every Thursday starting in April for 6 weeks. Once we do that 3-hour meeting, you'll have homework to do at home, and we estimate that will take you about 3 hours as well. So you're looking at about 6 hours a week over the course of 6 weeks. In addition to those hours of training, you'll also be doing 10 hours of virtual courtroom observation, where instead of Zoom, you're using WebEx and you get to observe what actually happens in a courtroom proceeding. I think that the courtroom observation is probably the most important part of the whole training experience. It really makes everything we talk about in training click. You get to actually read the report that the CASA volunteer has written and listen to the arguments of the attorneys and listen to what the judge says and what the CASA volunteer says. The judges will often call on CASA volunteers to speak up, and they really want to hear our perspective because it is important to help them make their decisions. The learning doesn't end there, though. It's actually just the beginning of your adventure with CASA. Once you finish the training, you'll be doing 12 hours of in-service every year once you swear in and you've been at CASA for a while, because things are always changing in the child welfare system. And our amazing coordinators like Tim, Sharon, and Janae that we have here, they will be there by your side the entire time. I say it in training, I'll get you started now. The answer to most questions is talk to your coordinator. Your coordinator is there to be your support, just like you're showing up for your CASA kid, like I like to call them, talking to them, letting them know what's going on, being a source of support for them. Your coordinator is going to be that support for you to make sure you know what you're doing. Before you actually swear in, though, there's a whole bunch that you're going to do. Step 1, if you haven't done it already, is to submit an application. And I'm just going to go ahead and stick that in the chat if you want to go ahead and put that application in once we're done with the webinar. We'll be looking at 4 references. We'll be sending them an email and asking for a character reference. What kind of person are you? Of course, we'll take your word for it, but we need that documentation as well. After the references, we'll be doing all sorts of background checks. We'll have you do a fingerprint. It's the same background check through the FBI that's required to work in most child-serving organizations. There's also a criminal record search where we go to the Chatham Sheriff's Office We search the sex offender registry, verify your social security number, and then, of course, we search the child abuse registry to make sure that there have been no substantiated allegations of child abuse or neglect. We need our CASA volunteers to be outstanding people, and I'm sure you all are. A really important note about these background checks, though, just because you have something that happened a decade ago, that doesn't mean you can't be a CASA volunteer. We're really just looking out for what we think might be a danger to a child. So if something happens and you're worried about it showing up on your background check, just talk to us and we'll be honest with you about if we think that it'll be an issue or not. And Kate can attest to that, I'm sure. Once all of that is done, you've done your 40 hours of training. Once you've done your 10 hours of court observations, all your background checks, your references, you've written court reports to practice, then the big day comes where you stand up in front of a judge, raise up your right hand, and swear to do right by the children of Chatham County.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think the most common question we get is how much time? So we already told you it's intense training, because I'm assuming many of you, and once we stop the recording, I'd love to hear more about each of you, but I'm assuming many of you haven't had extensive experience in child welfare or in the courtroom, right? And so the idea of going and testifying, right, or showing up in court or writing a report for a bunch of attorneys to read, that can be really scary or overwhelming. Well, we provide you with all the tools that you need. The coordinators that you have on staff, 3 that you see here, you have Tim, who's a former probation officer and knows the delinquency side incredibly well. Sharon, who's a former case manager to DFACS, so understands and knows DFACS incredibly well. We quiz her all the time. And then we have Janae, who has her master's in social work and has done mental health in our juvenile delinquency center, or what's the term I'm missing here? Come on, Janae. The detention center, the youth detention center. And then we also, our advocacy director also is formerly with DFACS. And then we have 2 coordinators that all they've ever done in their professional life has been CASA, pretty much. Like, they have eat, breathe, and sleep CASA. And so you have individuals that know everything, or know who to find if they don't know it, and can connect you with all the right resources. But we do have to set a very base level education so that you understand the process of the child coming into foster care, the expectations of a CASA volunteer, how to be trauma informed, how to work and talk to a child that has experienced some significant trauma. I myself have adoptive sons and who have come into my family with different levels of trauma, and learning how to address that has been a learning experience, and I've learned even more in my time with CASA. And so it's just seeing that up close and knowing how to address it. And then and also it's kind of designed this way that it's intensive at first, so that you make the commitment and you stick with it. Because once you do 40 hours of training, we know you won't walk away. And the point is, we don't want you to walk away, because you are that one constant in a child's life. And so we ask every CASA volunteer to commit to 1 full year, hopefully longer if the case extends, but at least 1 full year, so that a child doesn't have one more adult coming and going from their lives. Because the last thing we want to do is cause additional trauma to a child. So then the next question is, how many hours do I spend as a CASA volunteer? Because it seems like you're taking my life here. So the training is becoming a CASA volunteer is most intensive up front. The training is highly intensive. It is once a week for 3 hours for 7 weeks. I'm doubting myself.
6
weeks. Okay. 6 weeks. And you complete, and I'm going to go ahead and stop this share. Once you complete the training, you get sworn in, and then you wait to be assigned a case. Now, as I mentioned, at least half of our children live in different counties, almost half of them. And so it requires some level of travel. And so when a child comes into care, if they are placed further away and you're not able or willing to travel, then you most likely will wait much longer for a case. So we're really looking for people that are willing to travel. We ask that you visit your child once a month. if they live out of, if they live like 2 hours away, we would ask that you see them once a quarter, but you speak to them on the phone or Zoom virtually, do some level of virtual connection monthly. So you're still talking to them monthly and connecting with them monthly, but physically seeing them once every quarter. So we are looking for people that are able and willing to travel. If you have family that live in different parts of Georgia, or maybe you travel for work pretty regularly, that's great information to tell us, so that if a child is placed in that area, we know you'll be that much more likely and may even see them more than quarterly if we assign you to a case with a child in a different county. Also, children could be in Chatham County and then get moved to another county. So you have to have some willingness to travel quarterly to visit them. Now, visiting the child is fully on your schedule and the foster family schedule. So that means if you work a 9 to 5 job and you can't go during the days, during the week, which this child hopefully eventually will be back in school and wouldn't be able to anyway, you can go on the weekends, right? And you can make that. The only really stringent part timing about a CASA volunteer is court hearings. In the beginning, court hearings could be, we may not know immediately when they are, but your coordinator will always be with you. But then they're typically planned 6 months in advance. So if you have to take time off of work, you can, you will know 6 months in advance when that court hearing is, and we can provide you with a subpoena. So you can give that to your work to let them know that you are requested by a judge to attend. Hopefully they'll know that you're a CASA volunteer, not being requested to appear before a judge for another reason. And so otherwise, the typical amount of time you spend as a CASA volunteer is about 10 to 15 hours a month. That includes your visits, you're writing it up, you're calling doctors, and it really varies by the child. Every child is very different, and the amount of time that you would commit to that child would be based on that. And if it's several siblings that are placed at different places, that might take more time. But when you are become a CASA volunteer, we'll speak with you about the case, and you have the option to accept it. You know what your availability is. But we really are looking for people that have the capacity to spend that 10 to 15 hours a month. It's a little bit more upfront when you meet a child, because you really then have to get to know all the players, speak to birth families, speak to doctors and schools, and then it's a little more maintenance as you go, and then you really can work on developing long-term your relationship with that child. I want to share one quick story, but I want to ask Tim and Sharon and Janae if there's anything they would like to share, or anything that you feel like is really important for potential volunteers to know.
I'll just say, as you probably already know, your voice is just so important to these kids, because like she say, they're not always able to speak in court, whether you have a baby, or even if it is a teenager who is more afraid to speak in court, you have the ability to kind of speak their wishes and their best interests. So having great volunteers is so important and vital to these kids, because as Kate mentioned, there are so many moving parts. There's so many moving adults in and out of their lives. So having someone who's consistent and always there will be beneficial, not only right now, but in the long run, because they'll know that there is someone who has cared about me. Even if I don't see that person and know that person anymore, I know that person was genuinely there for me at one point in my life. So your role is very important, and I just hope you guys, choose to go through with it and see you in the long run. So yeah.
I love the voices of children. It's almost like you played a soundtrack to make your point very, very well there, Janae. And no, they sounded, her kids are adorable.
Well, I keep turning my camera off because
they run in there. Tim,
Yeah.
did you want to share something?
Well, I can tell the whole time she was like, "Ooh, when I get through talking, ooh, let me get out of here." I just want to say that what I've learned from this job is, the volunteer is so crucial and so important, and it's almost like watching people help people that they never knew before and changing their lives. And you're changing, like our title says, sometimes changing a child's story. You are actually having a chance to insert yourselves in a person's life and actually make a difference for them. And I've seen it happen over and over again since I started this job, and it's been such a great thing for me. It's opened my heart up to what what this life is really about, and it's about helping people, and you really get a chance to do that. And I'm not just saying this, but I really feel that this particular job is the most important, because we need people out there to talk for these children because they don't have anybody.
Mhm.
So if you decide to be a CASA, this is probably going to be the greatest job that you'll ever have.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. Sharon, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I also want to, it's even though it's child focused, youth focused, also remember that the parents are an important part of what we do as well. What we want to do is reunify the child if possible, as Kate said earlier, either with the parents or a relative, or as we say, a fit to kin or someone that they know. But it's very important as well to communicate and to ensure that the parents are receiving the services that they need. So it's very important to continue to speak with the providers, speak with DFACs to make sure that they are putting those necessary services in so that reunification can happen. So not only focus on the children, but the parents as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I've been with CASA for a little over 2 years, and as I mentioned, I'm an adoptive parent, so this is something that's near and dear, and I'm passionate about. But I also know what it's like to have children that are, that while my family is beautiful, and I'm so thankful that I have the family I have, seeing my children struggle with their identities um, and the way that they have to connect to their story, which is messy. And that's why reunification is so important, is that whenever we can, we never want a family not to be together if it's preventable. There are some cases, and all of these coordinators can tell you stories where there is like absolutely not, this child does not go back to the parent. So the child's best interests are but important. But just to keep that in mind. And I've been with CASA 2 years, and I'll never forget one of my most favorite experiences with a CASA volunteer has been in a panel, which is a room. So it's basically, there's what we call a panel review. It's citizens that meet and hear all about the child's case and provides recommendations to the judge. Similar to a CASA volunteer, but different in that they're just objective and they hear they don't have an invested interest in the child's life. They just hear the story of the child and then make recommendations based on what's presented to them. So I was in my very first panel review, and we had a teenage girl, and she was in there, and she was not loving life. She was, as most 17, 16, 17-year-olds are anyway, right? Like, not thrilled, but then she's highly traumatized. Her mother did not show up for the panel. So she had come all the way. She was placed 3 hours away. She came thinking she would get to see her mother, but her mother didn't show up. So she was really upset and devastated by that. But her CASA volunteer was there. So this panel, these citizens, mostly retired individuals, are sitting across the table. These like 3 or 4 older white people sitting across the table. They were all living the landings. And then we have this African-American 17-year-old girl sitting on the other side of the table, pissed off, right? So this is the dynamic. She is not happy. And my first panel review, I'm like, this is not going to go well. And she sat there angry and did not say literally one word. They asked question after question after question, and she did not answer. But you know what? She didn't have to, because every single time she was asked a question, her CASA volunteer was able to answer on her behalf. And her CASA volunteer would say, "Is this what you would like? Isn't this true?" And she would just be like, mm-hmm. Because the only person in that room, not her case manager, not her attorney, not the panel people, no one she spoke to, but she regularly texted and called her CASA volunteer because they had a long relationship. And so the panel was able to make their recommendations based on the information. This young girl who was going through some really crappy stuff did not have to speak up because she had someone else there doing it for her. Like, she was able to sit back and it not negatively impact the decision that was made and allow her CASA volunteer to fill in that gap for her. And that was just such a beautiful thing to me. It's not easy to be a CASA volunteer to a teenager, a highly traumatized teenager, but this volunteer got through that and showed her that I am here no matter what, and was able to advocate on her behalf. And so that's the power of a CASA volunteer. All right, so I think staff, before I stop the recording and take questions, is there any other things that you would like to add? Anything that we missed?
I just want to add that I love hearing that story, and I believe I was in that panel review with you. It was one of the first things I ever saw when I started working with CASA some time ago. And it reminds me of something else you've shared. So I'm not stealing your thunder, that this is just such a different volunteer opportunity. It's not like stocking shelves at a pantry, although that's still a great thing to do. You don't get to see what that food means to the person when they take it home and they can cook a meal. You get to create a real human connection with someone who maybe feels written off by everyone that they come in contact with. And it will probably be the most rewarding volunteer experience you've ever had. I know that it has been for me.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric. And we actually, if you go to our website, our blog, there's about 4 or 5 different stories similar to the one that I gave, written by our different coordinators, if you want to see the impact of a CASA volunteer too in that way. So I'm going to stop recording.